So, today we're going to talk about the mistakes that people make while creating three different kinds of content. So, the first one is content that helps you amplify, second one is content that helps you solidify, and finally, content that helps you ground yourself. Okay, now that the tea is brewed and I am ready with what I want to talk about, here we are. So, the biggest mistake that someone can make while trying to work on thought leadership content is not sounding authentic. And what I mean by that is when you come off as someone that has an agenda at the end of your discussion. And people these days, I do blame AI for this because of all the AI slop and the AI blob that is out there. People's radar to detect an ulterior motive is the strongest right now. And one of the things that ends up happening with your content is that you are reactive instead of being proactive. I'll give you an example over here. So, if you often post thought leadership content with the idea of, oh, one of your competitors is talking about this, so I can also add to this, you're already starting off on the wrong foot. But if you start with the idea of, okay, my competitors are talking about this in the industry, I also have something to talk about in the industry, and I'm going to talk about it in this way, you're off to a better start. And that's exactly what I want to talk about. When you don't think about how you want to project yourself and how you want to share your ideas or your perceptions about the industry, you end up being extremely reactive to others. One of the easiest ways to fix this is if you are thinking about industry trends, try and divide these into touch points. Instead of trying to go in with the idea of I need to come up with one thought leadership post or at least two or three thought leadership posts, pick one deep dive of the industry and break that down into touch points. So if you're taking one particular perspective, break it down into two or three different touch points. That could either be through blog posts, social posts, video posts, podcasts, and now you're essentially talking about the same topic from different perspectives with different touch points. Because the idea is when you're doing these deep dives, you don't want to overwhelm your prospects or your readers. That's the worst thing that you can do. If you can break your idea down into smaller chunks, you automatically become more digestible. When you're digestible, the most complex topics tend to be the easiest sell. When I say easiest sell, I mean the easiest to convince. And of course, if it's easy to convince, you will end up convincing someone to buy from you or at least hear you out, worst case scenario. That's how you try and combat not sounding authentic, is figuring out a topic, going in depth across two or three multiple touch points. And I do understand often you can get caught in this loop of, oh, I've got nothing new to say. But in those scenarios, I would like you to consider the idea of how have you been building on what's being said so far. And often you realize when you start explaining what you've been doing so far, you will slowly start to see a difference in how you've been positioning yourself a little bit differently. The main reason for this is when we look at our approach from a bird's eye view, everything seems similar. But when you go more granular, you slowly realize your journey has been different to others. So the approach you might be taking in broad strokes might be similar, but when it comes to the finer details, you've been doing some things differently. The second topic is about amplifying your content. Content that helps you amplify is based on how you share industry frameworks. And these frameworks are often more nuanced. They are more personalized to your experience and how you have been helping your prospects. But the biggest mistake that people do over here is to go very generalist with the kind of frameworks they share. Well, the second type of content that I wanted to talk about was content that helps you amplify. More specifically, where you share frameworks and know-hows about your industry or the kind of work you do with what you've learned so far. And the biggest mistake that people end up doing with this is being too generalist. In my experience of 5 years in B2B marketing, I've realized this happens because you're trying to play it safe. And from a business perspective, I understand, especially if you've got senior stakeholders involved, you're trying to not offend people or get any amount of bad press from this. But the fact that you're even trying to post any kind of content out there will involve you offending someone. So, general advice is often overlooked, no matter the amount of hard work you put into it, of breaking down those frameworks into, say, a carousel post or a PDF or a short video or an interview series, it'll be ignored. How do you fix this? Is you try and pick first your service, whatever you want to talk about. Once you pick that service, now you try and do at least one service framework breakdown a month. I've realized if you try to do anything more, I'm sure there are examples out there where people are getting some level of success, but I would highly recommend sticking to one major framework a month. You can break this framework down based on your experience, best results, and ideal outcome. Once you do that, and you've categorized in your head of what this framework is going to be, I want you to try and divide that into at least 2 or 3 different blog posts. Again, mainly because you don't want to overwhelm the reader, and second, because you want to trigger some level of frequency bias. What I mean by that is once you plant the seed of having a framework to solve a problem, you want to be present on other platforms or other forms of media talking about the same framework. And that's how people start to hear and see what you've been wanting to say. And I've seen frequency bias play a big role in, say, for example, if you're trying to purchase a car and you decide you want to go with this particular make, and you've been fixated on trying to look at the features, you've been fixated on all the colors, and suddenly you start to see more of them on the road. Not because they've suddenly increased the number of sales, but because your mind is now more aware about that topic. And one of the things that the car brand has done in that particular example is divide itself on different platforms through different mediums. So wherever you see them, you're always being influenced through different formats. And that's the same idea with frameworks. If you've got a very specific niche point of view on how to solve a problem, break that down into different formats across multiple media forms. And that often will give you enough commentary and social proof to add on, because all these places where you share them, people will start to notice and they'll start to add some social context to it as well. So that's how you fix mistake number 2 of being too generalist. And the final one is content that helps you ground yourself. The mistake that people make over here is just trying to share all the good bits of what has happened in their career so far. So, for example, they'll only share the highs and barely talk about the lows. Another mistake which adds on to this is showing a very polished version of yourself. I mean, I get it if you've got the resources to hire an editor or hire someone that can do your costume, someone that can write all your scripts for you or write all your posts for you. But the more you start to invest in this without having started somewhere, the more you'll be lost in other voices. And that's what I want you to think about. I want you to focus mainly on your why. Very specifically, there's a great video of Simon Sinek. I believe this is a TED Talk or something else. I'll try and link it in the description. But he talks about going deeper into the why. And that video really resonates with me. And a lot of people, when they're starting their journey or sharing their personal journey of how they're building something, forget about that why, and they focus more on the ability to, how can I just explain what I do rather than showing what I'm doing. So if you're trying to do this, I would recommend trying to go as frequent as possible, because people love to know how chronologically you have progressed so far. So if you can't do that, then I would recommend at least trying to do this twice a month, where you give a little detailed journey or a detailed view into what's been happening with your journey so far. And you do this by sharing your learnings of how you got from point A to point B. And in that journey of point A to B, what are the mistakes you made? What were the things you learned, and how did you fix them? It might sound like you're not contributing anything to a specific platform. Say, for example, if you're sharing your personal journey on LinkedIn, you might question yourself of why do people want to hear about this? Or if you're sharing a business perspective on YouTube or Instagram, you might again question, is this really the right platform when people really showcase an over-engineered part of their life over here? But that's exactly the point. It's one part of your bigger content funnel. So once you do that, I want you to take a specific example and show how you've improved so far. One of the things that you can do, or with this same example of going from point A to point B, you can take this in different scenarios of your life, but make sure you connect them in some way to your business or to what you're trying to build over here. So for example, I'm working with a small family-owned business right now, and they do car cleaning, car detailing. And I've been trying to showcase more of their journey. And while it's a work in progress right now, but the way I do it is I've tried to divide one part of the owner's history of business and the other part of what the current business is doing. And then both of them are converging into what we're trying to show with his content. So you might just see more of that online as we go ahead, but that's the idea of building grounding content, which basically shows where you are in your personal journey. So that's how you fix that mistake. And finally, the reason why I'm doing this is to give you guys some level of structure. But remember, structure is not everything when you're lacking any form of conviction. So I've given you 3 types of content because these are the most common ones that small businesses and budding businesses can use. But I want you to focus more on the substance. Structure can be built in various different forms, and you will eventually land at something that works for you. But substance is something that is your own. Without substance, there's no point of having any structure to these kind of things. So try not to fall into the trap of systemizing things or formulating a process. Rather, just focus on getting it out first. So ship your content or build your content first, and then think about how you can replicate this in the future. That's where you can try to systemize things or build some level of structure. But first, focus on building it. And that's it for this video. I have now shared everything that a small business should be doing in terms of branding, what they should be building, what kind of content should be going out, what mistakes they cover with this kind of content, and how you fix them. I am sure I'll be sharing a lot more with you in the coming weeks. But for now, this video ends the series of these explainer videos for small businesses. I would really love it if you guys can like, share, and subscribe, as everyone says on YouTube, but it really takes me far. And thank you so much. See you guys soon.